So Jerry Dulac doesn't think the Steelers are going to end up with Jalen Ramsey. Let's not forget, Jerry Dulac was also the one that said this.
The starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers Week 1 in 2025 is named.
I could tell you it won't be Aaron Rodgers. They have no interest in doing that.
Now, granted, you do have other reporters like Adam Schefter saying that Ramsey is looking to play on the West Coast.
The Dolphins continue to have conversations about trading Jalen Ramsey, and I think that a trade there will get done. The question is, when does it get done? Does it get done next week, the week after, prior to the start of training camp? I don't know exactly when it's going to be, but Jalen Ramsey will get traded. It'll be, I would expect, before the start of training camp. We'll see how it shakes out, where he goes. I think he would like to go to the West Coast, to Los Angeles, Rams, Chargers, somewhere like that, and we'll see how that happens.
But I wouldn't count the Steelers or Omar Khan out of the Ramsey sweepstakes at all. In fact, there's some stuff being floated out there that Ramsey's following a bunch of Steelers now on Instagram. Now, I don't know when that happened. Maybe he was already following. You know how this type of shit goes, so take that with a grain of salt. But then you have the whole wanting to play for a West Coast team. How much does that really impact your decision? Maybe that's a preference because Jalen Ramsey has only played football in warm weather areas, Jacksonville, even going back to college, Florida State, Jacksonville, and then with the Rams, and then with the Dolphins. But it's like you're only staying at the spot where you're playing for how many months out of the year, and how many of those months is it cold weather? Like if it's Pittsburgh, we're talking maybe November, December, January. That's it. 3 months, 2.5, 3 months out of the year, you're talking about cold weather, coldish weather. And I don't know, with some of these recent winters and late falls, I mean, it doesn't really start getting cold like that until end of December or January anyway. If you've been living in Pittsburgh, you know what I'm talking about. So I don't think those of us that are pro Jalen Ramsey coming to the Steelers need to lose hope based off of what Schefter or Jerry Dulac said here. I think there is still a pretty decent chance that it could happen. But want to talk some Rodgers, because I thought Mark Schlereth a few days ago had some interesting things to say about Rodgers' tenure with the Jets.
And one thing that Aaron and I had a conversation about when he was with the Jets was how abysmal their running game was and how schematically it made no sense. And I brought up the conversation. I started the conversation, and then Aaron went on for about a 25-minute diatribe on just their run game. But I was like, watching the Jets last year, it was the worst schematic, the worst kind of just the worst schematic run game I've ever watched in the NFL. Like I kept watching plays. Yes. Like there's a difference between having guys that can't block people. I mean, I've seen that too, right? But having your players do things that make zero sense. So I asked Aaron about it, just about the run game in general. And I said, man, this is like, it's really bad. This, and he went on this diatribe just about, the dysfunction of what we're trying to accomplish and all these different things. And so one thing I know about Arthur Smith, he does a great job in the run game, and he does a great job with personnel groupings.
I think it's funny because a lot of people, when they look back on the Jets' 2024 season and look at their awful run game and how inept they were on offense at times, and put all that blame on Aaron Rodgers and say he had full autonomy, he was just running shit the way that he wanted to run shit. The reason the run game was bad is because Aaron Rodgers isn't as mobile as what he once was, or like teams felt like they were just so one-dimensional, and it's all Aaron Rodgers' fault. But after hearing these comments, clearly Rodgers didn't have as much say in the Jets' offense as we were led on to believe. Now, I'm sure he still had a certain amount of autonomy. could do checks, audibles, and had influence. Let's not get it twisted. But I think what Schlereth is saying here is that Aaron Rodgers, couldn't even overcome the Jets' dysfunction because, like, what's the point of Rodgers' autonomy or him seeing things a certain way or having the ability upstairs to make checks and do audibles and try to get the offense in the best spot possible, play in and play out, when the schemes and the blocking aren't right? So, like, you're already shooting yourself in the foot before you even get onto the field Sunday. And I think that's an insight that hasn't been brought up at all. I think what Schlereth is saying here is very interesting because no matter what Rodgers does good or what he tries to do good for the offense, it's just always going to be hampered. It's always going to be weighted down by the New York Jets' dysfunction overall. Because people, again, put all the blame, it felt like, on Rodgers and how the Jets season went last year. And I'm not saying he's not deserving of a portion of it. I guess you could debate on what that portion should be, what that percentage of the pie chart should be. But now it's like, okay, when did Rodgers have his best success? Obviously with the Packers, and he was at the peak of his powers. He was more in his prime than what he was with the Jets, clearly. But what did he have with the Packers? Consistency, continuity, good structure, good foundation, good coaching, all that stuff, right? Didn't have that with the Jets. We saw how it went. He was still able to put up numbers, still was able to show that he can make every throw.
I was like, damn, like Aaron can play. And then I'm watching him pregame on Sunday morning. And pregame, I'm watching him throw the football versus the way a bunch of 25-year-olds throw the football. And it's like varsity versus JV. Like, that dude can still rip it. I mean, rip it. And once he started feeling decent and healthy toward the end of the season for the Jets last year, that dude started playing really good football.
But now he goes from the Jets to the Steelers. And what do the Steelers have? All the stuff that I was just talking about with the Packers. Competence, continuity, foundation, structure, a good floor. It's almost like Rodgers and the Steelers are on the same path. They're on the same wavelength and need each other. Because Rodgers, after that stint with the Jets, got to be thinking to himself, like, man, I went from what I had with the Packers and was looking for some excitement, was looking for something new, something fresh, more influence. And, like, man, that can't overcome dysfunction. That can't overcome incompetence, clearly. So maybe I took what I had with the Packers a little bit for granted. Now he gets that again with the Steelers, and Rodgers can definitely benefit from what the Steelers got going right now and with Arthur Smith. Like, Arthur Smith, he's competent, man. Like, there's no denying that at all. I actually thought he had a decent year last year outside of the last 2 or 3 weeks. And unfortunately, those 2 or 3 weeks were like probably the most 2 or 3 important weeks of last season. So the timing was bad. But what he did with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, how he was able to tailor the offense for each of those quarterbacks and their skill sets. We went from a very run-heavy team with Justin Fields to a very pass-happy team with Russell Wilson for the most part. And we were humming on offense for a good portion of the year, sitting at 10-3. So, like, Arthur Smith, he's competent. Like, and I feel like there is already a built-in trust between Rodgers and Smith going back to whatever relationship they've built over the years, because it seems like they've been connected somehow, some way.
Arthur Smith, you guys have had Art on the show many times. We've had a friendship for a couple years now, and I just like what he's all about. I like when he's on your show.
And maybe part of that is due to Arthur Smith actually being on a coaching staff and working under Matt LaFleur, Aaron Rodgers, head coach for the Packers, when you can argue he maybe had 4 or 5 of his best seasons of his career. Basically, what Schlereth was telling me there, and that insight, is that I think Rodgers is just happy. He'll be at a good point with just having competence surrounding him on offense. Like, he isn't looking for complete autonomy of the offense, and he said as much whenever he first talked to the Steelers media.
I don't understand that last term, take over when I see fit. I mean, I've called some 2 minutes over the years, but the idea that somehow I need to or have spent most of my career playing outside of an offensive system is just not correct. So I'm going to learn the offense, and Arthur and I are going to talk a bunch this summer, And if there's things that I like that I'd like to see in the offense, Arthur, I'm sure, is going to put it in. But he knows how to call a game. I know how to get us in the right spot based on what's called. There's 2 or 3 plays called in the huddle sometimes. My job is to get us in the right play.
I think he's looking for competence. He's looking for trust. Can my coaching staff just get the basics right, like a run game scheme, so I don't have to worry about that? The timing, the play calls. Can you do well on first and second down? Get me in a good spot on third down. First and second down, it's been said, it's been put out there that's a little bit more on the play caller. But once you get to third down, that's on the quarterback. So Rodgers is like, can I at least trust someone to get me in the right spots on first, second down, so we can keep the chains moving, keep the timing of the offense right? And Matt LaFleur did that to a really high clip with the Packers. And Arthur Smith has that connection with Matt LaFleur. They work together on the Titans staff. And that's the other thing. Whenever you think of those MVP seasons with Aaron Rodgers, I know a lot of people probably say, oh, man, Rodgers, he was just running shit out there. He was throwing the ball all over the yard. That wasn't the case. It wasn't at all. It was a very, West Coast scheme. Rodgers would get under center. They had a good run game going. Rodgers was making short passes. It was very, you could tell it was a mixture of both, like Matt LaFleur's system with Aaron Rodgers, and you saw it worked at a pretty high clip. It was like 3 seasons in a row. They were 13-3. Could they have done better in the playoffs? For sure. But Rodgers, back-to-back MVPs, arguably the best stretch of his career. Again, and that's not even at the peak of his powers. That's not even at where he's at the height of his athleticism either. That was, mid to late 30s when he was doing all that stuff. Now he reunites with a guy that is under that Matt LaFleur system, that scheme. I'm sure the terminology isn't too far off with Arthur Smith. And he knows run game. That's the one thing Arthur Smith definitely knows. And that is only going to help Aaron Rodgers, because obviously the Jets not having any run game going last year wasn't a benefit to Rodgers and his offense. I think this is going to work. I really do. And Mark Schlereth and, him giving us some behind-the-scenes look in the conversations he was having with Aaron Rodgers gives me even more hope for that. But let me know your comments and thoughts on not only the Rodgers, Arthur Smith dynamic, but the Jalen Ramsey stuff. How likely do you think it is based off the recent reports that came out, et cetera, et cetera. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Stay chilling, and peace.